Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the M1 iPad Air 5 and see how this particular iPad holds up in 2024. Now, I will definitely tell you with all, means necessary, this particular iPad, the iPad Air 5, was a very good iPad that came out, and I still think it's completely worth buying. I think Apple knocked it out of the park, and I still think it's a very, very good iPad. They didn't really have to change the design anything like crazy. They didn't have to do anything wild. All they had to do was put the original, M1 chip instead of the original M1 iPad or the iPad Air 4 at the time, and that was already enough, in my opinion, for them to go and sell a bunch of these things. Now, I'm not really even too sure of the sales numbers of this iPad, but it's a very safe, reliable iPad that I would recommend a lot of people to buy, and Apple's still selling it brand new, so you can't really go super wrong with it. If there's a problem with it, you can go and always return it. There shouldn't really be a problem with it as far as I know. Now, if you want to pick up this iPad or some other iPads that I would also recommend buying this year, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there, and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside of this particular iPad, you can kind of see what's going on with this particular device as we take a look at it. So in the front, you had a 10.9-inch liquid retina IPS LCD panel. It was a fairly good panel for the most part, very, very high resolution. And if you're getting these types of devices, you're definitely going to see how big of it, how nice of a display this thing is for the most part. And it's not even a ProMotion display. It's standard 60 Hertz. It's not the brightest panel of all time, but it is a very, very nice, good looking panel. And I definitely do think, if I'm going to go ahead and buy an iPad, I like this iPad display. I think it looks great. And there's really not that much to complain about there from that particular perspective, from a front display perspective. You are getting a little bit of bezel around the whole entire display as far as I know. So it's a little bit it's not the thickest bezel of all time, but it is a little bit thicker than maybe usual. But again, even that's not that big of a deal. And that's just maybe one other thing to kind of keep in mind there. You have the front-facing camera, and overall a very, very good-looking, front. On the sides, it is a completely flat-sided iPad, which again is really nice because you can basically just go ahead and use this iPad as you normally would, and because it's flat-sided, it does support Apple Pencil 2. Some iPads support Apple Pencil 1 that are flat-sided, but this one supports a, second generation one, which is really nice. And once again, if you're going through and buying some sort of iPad like this, you're going to be getting a fairly good, robust, and pretty modern feeling iPad from this particular perspective. A USB Type-C port on the bottom, which you can use with USB Type-C accessories, which is a really, really nice touch. On the backside, you're getting a flat back completely, which again is very, very nice. I love having a flat back. It's a single camera setup on the top left corner, and that's kind of all you're really working with this particular device. There really isn't anything else super insane going on with it. It's pretty much what you'd expect. I think for the most part, if you're using this type of iPad, you kind of know what you're getting into. So that is kind of a nice thing going on here. Without a doubt, in my opinion, it definitely gets a thumbs up for me on the exterior of this particular device. Now, on the other side of things, the price tag of this iPad, because it's still being sold brand new, it's a brand new iPad, you have to, spend the most amount of money for it. Not the most amount, but it's, in the brand new price tag, it's a little bit expensive. But in the used market, it is a little bit cheaper. So if you are somebody who is wanting to go ahead and basically get a little bit of a, cheaper device, you can always go through and get this iPad in the used market and save a little bit of money going, into that perspective. That would probably make a lot more sense for a lot more people, because if you're wanting to go ahead and basically get a cheaper, device, you can go and just basically buy this particular device in the used market and save a little bit of money from that particular perspective. So if I were you, I know Apple's still selling this device brand new, but you can always save some money if you want to by going in the used market and picking up this device from there. So just a thought, just one other thing to kind of keep in mind there. Now, in terms of the camera side, this device does have a 12 megapixel wide angle camera on the back, then a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera on the front. Now, why is the front camera ultra wide and the back camera standard wide? Well, the big thing here is that this particular device has center stage. So center stage is that type of, iPad capability, which allows you to basically just have this particular iPad. You can kind of move around on this iPad and it can still kind of follow you around and stuff. And that is actually a pretty cool feature and a pretty cool advantage to have with this particular device. And once again, that in and of itself is a super nice thing. If I'm going through and if I'm buying this particular iPad, I like having the capability of having center stage because it's always going to keep you in frame. And it's really, really nice. So that's the advantage of having an ultra wide camera there. It's still a 1080p sensor, but you can do 1080p at 60. So it's not terrible, but it actually would have been nice had we did have something like maybe 4K or something like that on the front. But again, I get it. I guess, maybe iPad Air 6 will have that type of capability. On the back though, we do have 4K at 60. So if you are somebody who is wanting to kind of get a little bit of a better sensor, you can always utilize that back camera. But this is what I'll tell every single person. This whole entire camera setup, the front and the back of this iPad, is basically exactly what you're getting on something like an iPhone XR. So if you take a look at an iPhone XR, that type of camera setup you're getting on that device is more or less exactly what you're getting on this type of device. So if you have an iPhone that's newer than the iPhone XR, well then that's just one thing to keep in mind, because you're probably going to be getting a better sensor on that device than from something like, like on your iPhone rather than this iPad. So I doubt you're really ever going to use this iPad anyways, but just like another thing to kind of keep in mind there. So from the camera side, that kind of covers it up there. Now from the software side of things, this is honestly a pretty good advantage for this type of iPad, because the cool thing here is that this particular device is going to basically be giving you a pretty good experience, I would say, from that software side of things. Mostly because this iPad still has, future ahead of it, and because it has that M1 chipset, this is a pretty good advantage because you don't have to go ahead and basically worry about this iPad being unsupported with software. The M1 MacBooks are still supported, the original M1 iPad Pros are still supported, so this thing, I would say, I don't know how much longer this thing's going to last, but I would probably argue this thing's going to last probably another 3 maybe years, maybe more. I don't know how they're going to, we don't really know that much about their M series of devices, how long they last. I'm expecting them to make them last more because hardware-wise, they're very, very powerful. So I guess we're just going to have to wait and see what happens there. But that might be another thing to kind of keep in mind in the back of your head too, that this device is going to be supported with software for a bit of time more so than now. On top of that, the performance of this device is very, very good. These M1 chipset devices are still very good even in 2024. You have to keep this in mind. This thing had that M1 chipset. It also had 6 gigabytes of RAM, and it goes up to 8 gigs of RAM if you want them. But this iPad also has 8 gigabytes of RAM, which is genuinely very insane. That is basically the same type of, performance that you're getting on like the base model MacBook Pro, M1 MacBook Pro, base model M1 MacBook Air, and those things were very powerful. Even now in 2024, those MacBooks came out in 2020, even now those MacBooks are still very, very powerful, and this one is no exception. This is a very powerful device, and I'm still a massive fan of this particular device from the performance side. Realistically speaking, no matter what you're going to do from a performance perspective, you're going to be having and getting a really good time from this particular iPad. So if you're somebody who's a student and you're just taking notes and you're just doing documents and that type of work, presentation work, it's perfectly fine. If you're just taking it up a notch, you're doing video games or like any sort of games on this particular device too, this is going to be a very, very good device from that perspective as well. And especially if you're going to having heavy gaming or anything like that at all, this is also going to be a pretty good performing device from that as well. It's going to be pretty good basically all throughout. I don't think it excels in like one thing, but I would say from the mixture of the performance and the battery life, this is a pretty good performing device and you can't really go wrong with it. Like, I'm still a humongous fan of this particular phone. Like, I'm still a massive fan of this particular tablet. And I do think this particular iPad is a very, very good device when it comes down to it. So that right there kind of covers it up there as well. And to kind of sum up this entire video, what I'll definitely tell you is I definitely do think the M1 iPad Pro is very much worth it in 2024. I think this was a very good iPad. I think it still has a lot of capability. And if I'm going to recommend an iPad to people, it's probably going to be something like the iPad Air as a starter iPad. This thing has a lot of capability, a lot of quality, and I would 100% recommend purchasing this iPad if you're in the market. Go for this. You can also buy like an older, like maybe M1 iPad Pro if you want to, but I think this is a very good option. I would 100% recommend buying it for sure. So that pretty much covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.